All right. Okay, so I assume you can see the slide, right? So today, as you can see, we have a very important topic, which is considered to be some fertile soil for other more important papers, articles, and even it's considered to be a new method for assessment for students doing their BA or MA in translation. The topic is translation commentary, and sometimes it's called annotated translation. Sometimes we call it commented translation or translation annotation. So although some people would draw some firm dividing lines between translation commentary and annotated translation, today we're going to deal with them both on an equal footing, dealing with both of them as one concept or dealing with them interchangeably. The most important book that you can start with if you want to have a thorough background about this is Translation Commentary, The Art Revisited by Penelope Sewell. This book was published in the year 2002, and it's very important. Actually, one of the earliest ideas about the translation commentary was mentioned by German scholars in the year 1980s, like Just Holz Mantare and Britta Gabriel. They both said that students should be given the chance to voice, to express their reasons for making translators or for making translation choices and decisions in addition to their translation. So they have first to translate a text, and then they have to provide their reasons why they translated the text in the way that they have done it. Okay, so Sewell is considered to be who is the author of this book. She is a female scholar, and that book was published in the year 2002. She was the first scholar who published a book-length work. So before her, we just had some articles or fragments on this topic. But Sewell was the first person who dedicated a book-length work on translation commentary. And this book came to fruition, and it is the fruit of her work and experience, which was based on her work or experience of teaching BA and MA French students at the University of London. Okay, so if we move on, we have some general overview. First, we need to describe where it fits. I mean, translation commentary. It falls under the sub-branch of applied translation studies. Now, if we go back to the year 1970, we have a person who's called Holmes. Holmes divided the translation studies, and it was the first time translation studies to be coined in conference on translation studies. He was the first person, John Holmes was the first person who coined that term, translation studies, and he broke down translation studies into applied translation studies and theoretical translation studies. So translation commentary comes under applied translation studies. It also comes along with translation criticism, whether it is revision, evaluation, or review. It is retrospective in nature, and so is annotation. Now, we say retrospective, it means that the process of describing the process of translation occurs or takes place after the translation is completed. and we have introspective process, which is a description of what happens during the process of translation during the process itself. So we have introspection and we have retrospection. Translation criticism utilizes the principles of contrastive analysis. By the way, it is just in England and America that it is called contrastive analysis, and in other parts of the world it is called contrastive linguistics. Yet it is not aimed at studying differences between two languages. Rather, it focuses on equivalence or matches and mismatches between source and target texts. Okay. Now, I just want to remind you, if you have ever had the chance to work with machine translation systems or translation memories, we have two very common terms: exact match and fuzzy match. Exact match is when you have the term is identical in both source and target texts, and fuzzy when they are partially identical. They have some similar properties, semantic properties, but they are not 100% identical. Linguistically speaking, annotation derives from the verb annotate, which means to add explanatory notes, to supply a work with a critical commentary or explanatory notes, or provide interlinear explanations for words or phrases. While comment is used when commenting on others' translations, annotation is used to refer to the critical notes offered by translators on their own translations. So this is the major difference if you want to draw a firm line between translation commentary and translation annotation. So in translation commentary, you just provide comments on a translation which is carried out by someone else. Okay, sorry, it's the other way. It's the other way around. In translation commentary, you provide comments on the translation that you yourself have carried out. While in annotation, you provide the same comments, but on a translation which is done on people's same translation. So it's the same as the difference between biography and autobiography. Biography is the events or when you write your own life by yourself, while this is autobiography, while biography is when somebody else writes your life or the memories of your life in a book. So annotation for translation purposes is used to explain the decisions taken by the translator. So we will see what is required of students or of translators when they are required to provide translation commentary or translation annotation. We mentioned at the beginning that we're going to use both of them interchangeably. So both are used to refer to the same concept. So a variety of definitions of translation commentary or translation annotation. So one definition is it is a way for students to be assessed as to how they analyze source text by applying relevant theories and how they make relevant translation decisions. Another one, it's an opportunity for students to justify their translation product. They are given a chance to justify their translation. It doesn't matter whether their translation is good or bad. So this is very important. So it is not, here we are not concerned with the quality of translation. They are all given a chance to justify their translation. So we need to know why they made certain translational decisions in their translation. Okay, any questions so far? Do you have any question? Yes? Any question before we move on? Do you have any question? Yes? Could you please use your mics? Okay. Right. Let me have a look here. Yes. After session, please link. Okay, so no questions so far, right? And you can hear me, right? And you can see the slide.
Yes, doctor, we can hear you.
Okay, so let's continue. So today's lecture is supposed to be divided into two parts. The first part is theoretical, and the second part is practical. So I'm going to move at a rapid pace, relatively rapid pace, so that we can cover both things before Ramadan starts. So very important question is, what we finished this. Okay, so by now I assume that all of you now understand what we're talking about, because I guess that some students were a bit in the dark about what we were talking about. So now, after providing you with the definition, I assume that you are all on the ground and you've put your foot into the door. So what should a good translation commentary be like? So we have some characteristics that you have to ask yourself if these requirements are met or not. So a good translation commentary should first demonstrate that students have fully understood the theories cited and are able to apply such theories in their translation practice or examples competently. So that should display competent and extensive understanding of the theories being cited. Next, this is not just about applying theories to examples. It is also about students' awareness of their own strategies by being able to stand back to observe themselves and to accurately describe their own practice. So it mainly involves two things: to show a demonstration of understanding of theories, and second, to show or to be able to write down the strategies that a student has adopted in the translation. Okay? So in addition to linking theories to practice, competently describing one's practice is also a crucial element of translation commentary, because the latter is probably seen as a manifestation of awareness. So describing practice, the strategies followed, shows or reflects students' awareness of their work. So we always say to translate without translation theory is just like translating blindly. You have nothing to base your work on. In contrast, we have some undesirable features of translation commentary, and these often coincide with poor academic writing. So it is not possible to provide a competent or top-notch translation if you don't write well or you don't have sound grammatical rules to rely on when you translate. Okay? So now we have some undesirable features for translation commentary. So now I'm showing you the bad or the downs of translation commentary, or what features you should avoid, in other words, put it differently. So first, diving into the translation examples straight away without a proper research on relevant background information and terminology. So this is very important. You should avoid diving directly into the translation examples without a proper research. So you have to carry out some research on relevant background information and terminology. Second, when theories are not linked to translation examples. So this means that your work is missing. Your work is not perfect. You have to substantiate all your strategies by theories and to show relevance between theories and to link theories to the translation examples that you shed light on. Next, attempting to discuss too many issues or problems without a clear categorization of the problems and in-depth analysis on translation examples. So this is very important. So from the very beginning, you have to categorize, you have to underline the problems that you want to discuss in your commentary, and then you categorize them, you classify them. For example, you say that these examples fall under or belong to the camp of grammatical rules, for example. These come under lexical problems. These come under stylistic problems. These come under phonological problems, etc. Okay, so you have to find a way to categorize the examples that you want to cast light on and discuss thoroughly in your commentary. If you don't do that, by the way, this is the backbone of your work. هذا عمود الفقري لشغلك. If you don't have it, then your work is not systematic. Then you don't have a methodology. Okay? Without this, your work is just a collection of fragments. Next, inaccurate application of theoretical concepts. This is very important. So you have to show good understanding, to show accuracy in the application of theoretical concepts. For example, I'm sure that you came across Vinay and Darbelnet, 1958, okay, which showed some stylistic, discussing some stylistic approaches and some stylistic problems for French students translating into English. Okay, and they both gave 7 different techniques and strategies for translation, like calcs, like modularization, etc. So we had 7 different loan words. So all these, if they are not used accurately, for example, I'm just giving you an example, then there is an inaccuracy of application of the theoretical concepts of their theory. Developing an argument based on a mistaken translation or miscomprehension in translation. This is important. So you, again, if you notice with me, understanding is the common factor among all the 5 points so far. You have to show that you understand everything correctly so that you can develop and you can weave the threads of your understanding in the proper way. Only discussing one issue or one type of translation problem. This is a problem, by the way. So your work should focus on a variety of problems, of translation problems. You shouldn't just discuss just one. Okay? Failing to identify core issues in a piece of translation. So if you just focus on secondary points, then this is a problem. You have to identify the main or the major issues in a piece of translation. And the last thing is lack of awareness of what a real translation challenge or difficulty is. So you cannot, by logic or by nature, you cannot identify a translation problem if you don't know what the translation challenge or difficulty is. Okay? Any questions so far? Do you have any question? Yes? Any question? Okay. Now, some people claim that that we don't have standards for marking our commentary, for example, and we accuse instructors or we accuse people of being prejudiced against us. So there should be some marking criteria or standards to be distributed to students just right from the very beginning of the semester to know how they are going to be assessed. Okay, so it is not totally subjective. So on your left hand, we have categories of marking criteria. So mainly there are two: essay related criteria, and we have translation commentary specific criteria. So the first four ones, the marking criteria, are more general, and the last 5 or 6 criteria are more specific. So just to read them very quickly, we have in relation to essay, we have clarity and consistency. So your sentences must be clear, and for example, even in spelling, you have to be consistent. For example, if you're using American English or British English, if you're using spelling, grammar, so you have to be consistent in your usage. Critical analytic ability, all this will be shown and reflected in your translation. Acknowledgement of references, so you have to provide the bibliography or the references that you used at the end. Use of theories and reading. The second one, we have, as you see, analysis on source text, intention, and target text readership. Sensitivity of cultural transfer, ability of justifying or to justify solutions to problems, awareness, consideration of problems, and formation of overall translation strategy and specific translation strategy. So these are the general marking criteria, and the instructor is or should be tasked with clarifying each of these with tangible examples. Basic concepts. When doing translation-oriented analysis, in order to annotate one's own translation or comment on somebody else's translation, one needs to distinguish between obligatory features and optional features. So this is very important to understand right from the beginning, right from the start of your work on your research or on your translation. You have to identify obligatory features and optional features. So what obligatory features are and what optional features are. The former involve choices that must be followed by the translator in order to satisfy the rules imposed by the target language system, without which the translation will be ungrammatical. For example, let me give you a quick example. If we have a sentence saying حقق بايدن فوزا ساحقا. If you want to translate that, okay, can we start with حقق in English? For example, can we say achieved Biden? We cannot do that, because the word order or the target language system necessitates that you start with the subject first, not the verb as we do in Arabic. So this is an obligatory feature. Okay? So we say, for example, Biden, you have to start with Biden, which is the subject. Biden achieved a landslide success, landslide success, or resounding success. Optional features represent cases in which the translator can exercise real choice by deciding on one translation option rather than another or others. So here the translator has more than one option from which he could select just one. Okay, but this doesn't mean that he cannot use another one. Of course he can. And this is why we call it optional features. Okay? Again, for example, in obligatory features, we have to start with adjective, then we have a noun in English, like for example, an expensive car, right? But in Arabic, we have to do it the other way around. We start with what we call الموصوف, and then we have the adjective, الصفة أو النعت. فنقول سيارة فارهة أو سيارة فخمة أو سيارة باهظة الثمن إلى آخره. So we start with the noun, while in English we start with the adjective. So these are two examples of obligatory features. Okay? Any question? Any questions so far? Yes? Any question? Yes. No questions? Okay, so let's continue. Let's continue. So if you want to start, for example, you can start with the obligatory features and optional features, just as one way of categorizing problems. Purpose, so why you are doing this. The purpose of annotation is to defend the choices made by the translator. So you have to defend the choices. You have to be able to justify why you are doing this. And my students still remember, if they have good memory or if they have memory which is good enough, they can remember that I always provide justifications for using that lexical choice or that grammatical structure, and why this is or why this worked and why this doesn't. Okay? In the main body of the translation, the source text and target text can appear on facing pages. So this is good. If you can provide the translation just on a facing page of the source text, with notes at the bottom of the page, footnotes, or at the end as endnotes. But usually this is not preferable. هذا الأمر غير مفضل أو غير محبذ. Okay, so we just, it's fine to write the translation on a facing page of the source text, but notes are written as an essay in a different section or in a different division or part of the dissertation. Okay? But this doesn't exclude the possibility of adding some explanatory notes at the bottom of the page as footnotes or at the end as endnotes to elaborate on them in the text of your commentary. So it seems likely that the majority of the notes will be on the translation side, be they on translation strategies, language role, aspects of pragmatics, aspects of textuality, cultural aspects, stylistic aspects, or semiotic aspects. So see next chapters in this book, which is in this presentation. So however, the original text may be annotated also. So we have an analysis to be carried out of the source text, especially with regard to grammatical difficulties or ambiguities. So you are supposed or you are assumed to provide some analysis of the source text before you start your translation. What things you can predict to encounter as problems. Okay? For example, to comment on the length of sentences. We have short sentences, we have long sentences, we have complex structures, we have monosyllabic words, for example. Can we reflect translation of monosyllabic words to the target text? All these are open to discussion. So what to include? What to include? An annotated translation should have a brief introduction presenting the text. So usually the text is included in the dissertation itself, and this indicates its interest and explains what kinds of difficulties it might present. Getting this introduction just right is important. Why? Because a short background, this makes up a short background to the original text, and its author needs to be given by the author prior to embarking on the actual act of annotating. So it's fine to pave the way for readers to know what they are going to read. Okay? The reasons why the previous questions are essential. Annotation is needed by translators when translating a segment that leaves them with more than one option to follow. So as we mentioned, optional features, when you have more than one option which could work, you have to provide a justification for why we are following this option. In this case, the translator starts a series of actions, including analyzing the source text, highlighting the elements that need to be reflected in the target text, and to prioritize among the competing elements. Annotation is needed also to persuade their readers or your readers that they are aware of other options, but opted for this particular local strategy in rendering the text at hand for a particular reason. Okay? Right. If you still remember when I taught Islamic translation or translating Islamic texts, once I still remember we stopped at كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة, right? And we stopped at translating how to translate كم here. And we came to know that we call it كم التكفيرية, okay? And we find a way to translate that in a stylistic way that reflects the style of the source text when we translated that as many right? If any of my students who took this subject with me can remember this is attending us today. Now, what's the difference and what is the purpose? So, annotation, revision, evaluation, or assessment, all of them share the fact that they are all bidirectional or bidirectional. So they work in two languages. So they require the person to comprehend the content of the source text, identify the challenges that the translator may face, and be aware of the available local strategies that a translator may opt for. However, the purpose of annotation is to defend the choices made by the translator. Now, evaluation assessment seeks to measure the degree of efficiency of the text with regard to the syntactic, semantic, and pragmatic function of the source text within the cultural frame and expressive potentials of both source language and target language. So it's very important here to mention in passing the difference between review and the criticism of translation. Okay? So if you just allow here, can you see the chat room, please? Yes. So in review of translation, we just yes. So we just comment on a new translation. Okay. So just whether they are worth reading or not. So we don't go into deep analysis of the translation. We just provide like an opinion if the translation is good or worth reading or buying or not. However, if we go to criticism of a translation, okay, it is broader in scope. Okay, it's broader in scope, and it is analysis in detail to evaluate old and new translations. Okay, so we have big difference between review and criticism. Okay. Okay. طيب. If we go back here to continue, so okay. So revision, proofreading, and editing are different in the sense that revision is bi-directional process on bilingual texts, while both proofreading and editing are unilingual. So we have here an important thing to talk about. Okay, we have unilingual and we have bilingual. So if you are working with just one language, then this is unilingual, like editing or proofreading. You don't go back and compare it with the source text. Okay, so this is unilingual. And we have bilingual when you have revision, for example, when you have commentary, annotation, etc. So proofreaders normally concern themselves with language-related issues such as spelling, punctuation, and grammar. The overall shape of the piece of work should still be that of a conventional dissertation. So we're talking about translation commentary. So the dissertation should begin by introducing and justifying the translation project, providing any necessary contextualization for the reader. So this is important to say, to provide an introduction to your translation commentary, because I know that many students just translate the text and just write a few lines on what problems they might have encountered, but this is not the correct way of writing translation commentary. Also, the translation will be included in the body of the dissertation and will count towards the word limit. So sometimes people would include the body of the translation and the source text within the body of the dissertation itself. The translation should be included in the body of the dissertation at an appropriate point. So after providing the introduction, literature review, for example, then you can provide your translation. How to write a translation commentary? I assume that all of you are aware of this, especially students who have completed the requirements of an MA program here. First, you have to choose the text for translation, and choosing the text, you have to do that with wisdom. You shouldn't do it at random. This means that your text should serve to illustrate a particular argument. So there must be a reason for using the text in question. For example, to say whatever you want to say in the dissertation, and that reason must be clear. Unfortunately, many of our students spend months trying to look for a book, and their only reason for getting the book is, I like the book. And this is a shame on students following just this as a criterion for choosing the book. Basics here. Why are you translating or retranslating this text? All students must be asking themselves this question. The answer to this question should be less subjective than I liked it. And unfortunately, 99.999 of our students choose their books of translation for translation commentary just on subjective viewpoints. It is just that I like that book. Question 2, where does the text come from and where is it going? Who are you addressing? So is this text coming from German? Is it a translation of a source text? Because some students, okay, they translate an English book, but this book was originally written in German, for example, or in Swedish or in Japanese. So you have to know the origin or the source, the very source text of this text, the source text language. And where is it going? What is the target language? And who are you addressing? Are you translating this book for children so that in this way your style must be suitable for children? Are you translating this for lawyers? Then you have to be aware of legal jargon, etc. What were your priorities when translating this text? So you should have priorities. For example, fidelity to the source text. Are you faithful to the source text? In what way? The creation of a successful target text, considerations of audience, creative self-composition. Okay, so are you leaving a print of your own as a translator in your translation? All these are important points that you have to ponder over. What a translation commentary for our purposes should. Okay, so there should be a link between the translation and commentary. Okay, so this is number one, and this is central to the work. The commentary should do the following. It should contain an argument or a set of arguments that are illustrated by the translation. That's why you shouldn't just pick up any book at random. You should have a principle, you should have an argument that you want to defend or you want to oppose or object to. But you must have something that you want to defend or oppose. Also, it should address relevant issues of translation theory and practice. Are you following, for example, NIDAS? Are you following linguistics-based theories, sociolinguistics-based theories, philology-based theories, etc.? And it should open up the process of theoretically informed reflection that lies behind the creation of a translation product. So it should serve as a torch for other researchers in the future to continue this work. So here it's very important to shed light on the clear introduction that you have to provide at the beginning. In your commentary, a good basic introduction to the text, author, and context will set things up nicely. So you should include in your introduction some introduction to the text, to the author, and context. And I'm sure that most of you have no knowledge at all. They don't have the faintest idea about the author of the text that they translated. And this is wrong. This should precede the translation. Additionally, please bear the following points in mind. Again, you have to illustrate your arguments or points with a specific textual examples. So you have to pick up examples from your translation. You have to engage with the literary criticism on your text, author, and the genre. This will inevitably raise issues that will influence your thinking. And there is always something, and usually quite a lot, to be said about style and its translation. So it's wise to devote some part of your commentary on the style of the source text and how you dealt with this. Okay, we have a style, we have register. Okay, it's also helpful to include line numbers in your translation for ease of reference in the commentary. I will show you this. So this is very important, and I assume that you were shown this at the beginning of your work by your instructors. Subheadings may prove useful in signposting changes of topic. So when you organize your work by providing heading and subheadings. Make sure that your scholarly apparatus, in-text referencing, bibliography, footnotes, or endnotes conforms to the system that you've chosen for that has been prescribed by your department. For example, if you want to provide bibliography or the references that you used in your commentary, you have to cite that following MLA or APA, MHRA, Harvard, or Chicago, etc. So you have to know what is required by your department. Gloss or provide a literal translation for all foreign language citations. Do not assume that the examiners can read your source language. So if you are using in the text some Arabic words, you have to provide a literal translation so that everybody can understand why and what you mean by these Arabic words in the middle of your text. Source texts and any supplementary materials that do not belong to your word count should go in an appendix. So if you have certain or illustrative paintings, pictures, diagrams, photos, you can keep them and include them in the appendix at the end of your work. Make sure that your dissertation is the right length. It's very important. So you have to conform to the word limit. And this is an example that I created for you. When you translate, you can keep the text as you see. Lines are numbered so that when you refer to that, for example, you say in line number 10, we have a past simple tense. For example, just giving you an example. We have a semicolon. We have here we have present simple, etc. Here we have headings, and here we have subheadings. So all these can help you organize your work in your commentary. Okay? Any questions so far? Let me see if okay. Any important? Nothing here? No questions?
I have a question.
Yes. Yes, please.
So
yes,
should
go
we provide the reader with the description of pronunciation or a literal translation for the foreign language?
Well, if you want to transliterate the foreign words, you have to follow a key in that. Okay, because a key is provided by each journal or department to use to be as unified key or reference that you can use letters from. For example, some people would, for example, write ضاد, حرف الضاد, as capital D. Others as D with a short line over it. So it depends on the key that you take as your reference. Okay? Did I answer your question? Yes? So it is the same way that we have the IPA, the International Phonetic Association, we have a certain key of phonetic symbols, right? Each department, you have to provide the key that you are going to use at the beginning or in an appendix. But usually it is provided at the beginning of your work. Okay? With a source to find some more examples about translation or a good project to have a look at. Okay, right, Batul. I think you were one of my students, one of my brightest students, brilliant students, and you must have completed this experience before, and you experienced this before. So we will be happy to have a look at your own work, and we can discuss it together. Okay, so I will provide you with some tangible examples later today. Any other questions before we move on? Should I include a glossary? Glossary for what, Ranim? A glossary for what? If you have any foreign words that you think they are hard to understand, you can provide a glossary. Yes, why not? But since you are translating this, then you don't need a glossary. We usually provide a glossary for people before they translate. But since it is translated, then a glossary is not needed anymore. Okay? Any other questions? Right. Okay, so let's continue. Any question? No questions. Good. Okay. Okay. Where are we? Okay, so this is what we talked about, how you can organize your work for ease in reference, to refer the reader or the instructor to the points that you want to make reference to. Okay. If we continue, now we have some potential aims of translation commentary as an assessment method. And as we mentioned at the beginning, translation commentary has been used as an assessment method, especially for students or for programs where they don't have dissertation in its own right. So first, the goals that we aim at, first, to promote the ability to reflect on procedures which are often taken for granted. For example, all of us start with a noun, with the subject in translating into English, and we take it for granted. But if we ponder over this, if we pause and think why we do this, then you have to explain the difference of the word order of the English language. So you have to explain why you do this and why you don't do that. To draw attention to the relationship between surface words and the underlying meaning. So this is the relationship between denotation and connotation. To raise the profile of cultural knowledge required by translators. And it's very important to internalize the culture, especially the target language culture, and you have to adapt and to adjust that to meet the requirements of the source text, so that you don't have any contradiction between the two cultures. To focus attention on patterns of differences between Arabic and English, using the techniques of comparative stylistics. To promote awareness of notions of textuality, such as cohesion and coherence, and probably a good book to start with is Christian Nord, Text Linguistics. It is a good start, and this book was written originally in German, and then it was translated into English. And the last point is to encourage reading of a theoretical nature to underpin or to highlight, to emphasize, to substantiate, to support the commentaries. So if you don't have some theory to base your work on, then your work is useless. Okay, it's better not written at all. So if you have a look here, please. Would you like to have 5 minutes break? Yes? Would you like to have 5 minutes break? Yes? What do you think? Can we have 5 minutes break? Hello? Okay. All right. So we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we'll start with the practical part. Okay? and we'll see what we should say and how we can say that. Okay? So in 5 minutes from now, we are returning again. I will stop the recording. Please remind me when we meet again in 5 minutes from now. Thank you.